So we want to turn now to the sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell. The British socialite was Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend for many years, and she was convicted in federal court back in December of several sex crimes charges. Some of them include transporting a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity and in trafficking of a minor and other charges. So she is facing up to 55 years in prison. Federal prosecutors want her to get that full 55 years in prison, while her attorneys are asking for 5 years in prison. They believe she's suffered enough and that she's not guilty of these charges. They, of course, are appealing, but the probation department recommended a sentence of 20 years. So, of course, cameras are not allowed in federal court. We wish they were. We would bring that to you live if we could, but our own Michael Bryant is in that courtroom in Lower Manhattan, and he will let us know what happens as soon as he can and when that sentencing concludes. It started just about almost 2 hours ago at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So Mitra Horian, I want to start with you on this one. What are your feelings on the sentence here? I kind of got the impression, just with the way that Judge Nathan has handled this case, that she is not going to go easy on Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, we want justice, and we didn't really get that sense of satisfaction because of Epstein's suicide. And so I think that there is a lot of pressure to uh, really give us a sense of justice by giving her the maximum sentencing, or at least giving her something where she's not getting off easy.
Mhm.
I think there's something also especially egregious about a woman, and I think people are sort of reacting to this too, about a woman who's helping a man. We expect that of men, but there's something about a woman participating in that I think is really strikes a nerve with some, and I imagine the judge would agree.
I would think so too, because as a woman, and you have maternal instincts, right? And maybe all women don't have that, Mitra. But I know that as a woman, your gut would be to protect these young women, not to participate in this. And we saw that there was a lot of testimony that she was an active participant in this, and even laying her hands on these girls and things like that. So. Your thoughts on that, because it really is kind of disturbing and startling when you look at the testimony that we heard in this case, and the fact that she was a predator as much as Jeffrey Epstein was, at least according to the testimony.
Well, I think that's right, and I think that the observation that you all are making about kind of how the world views the distinction between how men would react in these situations versus how women would react, and certainly I'll avoid the gender bias that's part of this discussion, but certainly we view the idea that women would not engage in acts like this because of a maternal instinct to protect children rather than to send them to what she knew was going to be something abusive, dangerous, and harmful.
And Mitra, I want to ask you about that. I mean, obviously, we're talking here that she is a woman, and I hope, maybe there is a gender bias here, but women, she's a woman taking part in this. Maybe it's because we don't hear about this type of thing that often, but about a woman being involved in this type of activity, even though we know it happens. We are used to hearing about men, but do you think there is a gender bias here? Am I wrong in thinking that a woman should have some maternal instincts and protect other women and other young girls?
I think these situations are very complicated. Certainly, madams exist, and that's surprising as well. But there's a lot of psychology involved. There are things where, somebody might feel, there's power dynamics that are involved. There's also women who potentially have been abused themselves,
Mhm.
as children. And we don't really know what the nature of that is, and perhaps they are victims themselves in some way, but I think there is certainly this expectation that women understand what this would be like and would protect other women.
Fanon, something I'm getting a lot of tweets about with regard to the Ghislaine Maxwell case is the fact that the client list hasn't been made public. We know that Jeffrey Epstein hung out with a lot of really notable people. Prince Andrew comes to mind. That lawsuit against Virginia Giuffre was settled either earlier this year or late last year. So what are we ever going to see the client list? We know that the feds have a bunch of information and they typically don't release things for people who haven't been indicted. But do you think the public has a right to know who was on the client list?
I certainly think the public has the interest in knowing, the right to know. There should have been, and I'm surprised there were not more lawsuits that were filed against some of the other people who were on the list. I'm surprised that there were not more people called as witnesses who came from the list, and possibly some of them were. But I certainly think that the public, in their quest for understanding, would like to know.
Hmm.
And perhaps we're seeing the possibility of future charges. I don't know how the person who was kind of at the center of this has not only been prosecuted, but also now is deceased.
Right.
So I don't know the likelihood of additional charges, but certainly it would be interesting to see who else would be part of that list.